stood in front of the large mirror in her chamber. She wore the traditional wedding dress of her people. The fabric was dark purple, the color of royalty among the golden threads ran through it like rivers of light. She looked beautiful. Everyone said so, but her eyes were empty. Today she would marry a human. She had never wanted this. No princess in the history of her empire had ever married outside their species. They were proud warriors. They stood over 7 feet tall. Their skin was pale blue and their eyes glowed like silver moons. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They feared nothing. But the war had changed everything. The Dominion had pushed the empire to its limits. After 50 years of fighting, the empire was tired. The armies were weak. The people were dying. The emperor's father had made a difficult choice. He reached out to Earth for help. The humans were strange creatures. They were small and soft. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. Their bodies broke easily, but they had something else. They had numbers. They had ships. They had technology that even the found impressive. And most importantly, they wanted to expand into this part of the galaxy. The alliance was simple. Earth would send ships and soldiers to help fight the. In return, they would give them access to new trade routes and resources. But the humans wanted something more. They wanted a symbol of unity. They wanted a marriage between their people and the royal family. His father had agreed. She remembered the day he told her. She had screamed at him. She had cried. She had begged him to choose someone else, anyone else. But there was no one else. Her brothers had all died in the war. Her sisters were already married to nobles. She was the only one left. "It is your duty," her father had said. His voice was cold, but his eyes were sad. "The empire needs this alliance. Our people need it. You must sacrifice for them." And so she had agreed. The door to her chamber opened. Her handmaiden, a young woman named, walked in. Was small for a barely 6 feet tall. She had served since they were both children. "The ceremony will begin soon, my princess," said softly. Nodded but did not speak. "Have you seen him?" asked the human. "No," said. "I do not wish to see him until I must." Moved closer, she looked worried. "They say he is quiet, very quiet. He does not speak much." "Good," said bitterly. "Then perhaps I will not have to hear his voice often." Touched her arm gently. "Perhaps he will surprise you, my princess." Laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Surprise me? He is a human. What could possibly be surprising about such a weak creature?" She turned away from the mirror and walked toward the door. Her heart felt like a stone in her chest, heavy, cold, dead. The ceremony took place in the great hall of the imperial palace. Thousands of nobles had gathered to watch. They stood in long rows, their silver eyes watching everything. The hall was decorated with flowers and lights, but the atmosphere was tense. Could feel the judgment in the air. She could hear the whispers. "Poor princess," someone said, "married to a human." "How shameful," another voice added. "The royal bloodline mixed with such a weak species." "I heard humans cannot even survive in cold weather. They are fragile like glass." Kept her head high. She would not show weakness. She would not let them see how much their words hurt her. She was a princess of the empire. She had her pride. The human delegation stood at the front of the hall. There were about 20 of them. They looked so small compared to the around them. Their skin came in different colors, some pale, some brown, some dark. Their eyes did not glow. They had hair on their heads in various shades. They wore formal clothes in the Earth style, dark suits and ties. And there, in the center of them, stood her future husband. Ho! He was not what she had expected. He was taller than most humans, but still shorter than her by nearly a foot. His hair was black and cut short. His skin was light brown. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they watched everything with a calm, steady gaze. He was not handsome by standards. He was not ugly either. He was just ordinary. That was the word that came to her mind. Ordinary. He wore a simple dark suit, no decorations, no medals, no signs of rank or importance. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, his expression neutral. He did not smile. He did not frown. He just waited. Walked down the center of the hall toward him. Each step felt like a mile. The whispers continued around her, but she ignored them. She kept her eyes forward. She did not look at him until she was standing right in front of him. Then their eyes met. She expected to see fear. Humans were supposed to be easily scared. They were prey animals after all, but there was no fear in his eyes. There was no excitement either. No nervousness. No emotion at all. His eyes were like deep, still water. Calm, quiet, unreadable. It made her uncomfortable. The ceremony was short by standards. The priest spoke the ancient words, and Ho exchanged vows. She spoke hers clearly and strongly, her voice echoing through the hall. He spoke his softly, almost quietly, but every word was clear. When it was over, they were married. There was no kiss. They did not do such things in public. Instead, they touched foreheads briefly, a sign of bonding. When leaned down to touch her forehead to his, she felt the warmth of his skin. It surprised her. She had expected him to be cold like a dead thing, but he was warm, very warm. The reception that followed was uncomfortable. The nobles came to offer their congratulations, but their words were hollow. Many of them looked at Ho with disgust. Some did not even try to hide it. "Congratulations, princess," one noble said. He was a large male with scars on his face, a veteran of the war. "I hope your human can at least carry your bags." Laughter followed his words. Expected Ho to react, to show anger, to show hurt, but he did nothing. He just stood there, his expression unchanged, as if he had not heard the insult at all. This continued throughout the evening. Noble after noble made comments. They joked about his size. They questioned his strength. They wondered aloud how a human could possibly satisfy a woman. Ho remained silent through all of it. At first felt a small spark of respect for his patience, but as the night went on, she began to feel something else. Disappointment. If he could not even defend himself, how could he ever stand beside her as her partner? How could such a passive creature be worthy of a princess? Later that night, they were escorted to their shared chambers. The room was large and beautiful, with a huge bed and windows that looked out over the city. But too, it felt like a prison. She stood by the window, looking out at the lights below. Ho sat in a chair near the door. He had removed his jacket but still wore the rest of his suit. He was reading something on a small tablet device. The silence between them was heavy. Finally spoke, "You did not defend yourself tonight." He looked up from his tablet. "Defend myself." "The nobles, they insulted you, they mocked you, and you said nothing." He nodded slowly. "I know." "Why?" She turned to face him. "Do you have no pride, no honor?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his tablet and looked at her. His dark eyes were calm as always. "I have learned," he said slowly, "that words only have the power we give them. Those nobles wanted me to react. They wanted me to show anger. If I had done that, they would have had power over me." Frowned. "So you let them insult you without consequence?" "For now," he said simply. "There are bigger things to worry about than the opinions of people who do not matter." She did not know what to say to that. It was not the answer she had expected. It was not the answer O would give. O would fight. O would defend their honor with blood if necessary. But this human, he did not seem to care. "You are strange," she said finally. He smiled for the first time. It was a small smile, barely visible. "I have been told that before." They did not speak much after that. Ho offered to sleep in the chair so she could have the bed. She accepted without argument. She lay in the huge bed alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of life she would have with this quiet, strange human. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. And Ho lived together, but they were not truly together. They shared meals sometimes. They attended official functions together, but they did not talk much. They did not touch. They lived like two strangers in the same house. The court continued to mock him. Every day there were new jokes, new insults, new ways to remind everyone that the princess had married a weak human. Ho never responded. He spent most of his time reading or working on his tablet. Sometimes he would go to the training grounds and watch the soldiers practice. He never participated. He just watched, his dark eyes taking in everything. Began to wonder if he was stupid, or maybe just empty. Perhaps humans were really as simple as everyone said. Perhaps there was nothing inside him worth knowing. One day she found him in the garden. He was sitting on a bench looking at the flowers. His expression was different than usual, softer, sadder. She approached him slowly. "What are you doing?" He looked up, just thinking. "About what?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pointed at a small blue flower growing in the garden. "On Earth, we have flowers like this. They grow in the mountains near my home. I used to climb those mountains when I was young." Looked at the flower. It was pretty, but nothing special. "You miss your home." "Sometimes," he admitted, "but home is just a place. I can find peace anywhere." She sat down on the bench beside him. It was the first time she had voluntarily sat close to him. "You are very calm for someone so far from home, for someone married to a stranger who does not want him." He turned to look at her. His eyes were gentle. "You did not choose this any more than I did. I do not blame you for your feelings." "Then why did you agree?" she asked. "Why did you come here?" He looked back at the flower. "Because sometimes we must do difficult things for the people we care about. My people needed this alliance, and I believed that even an unwanted marriage could become something more in time." She did not know how to respond to that. His words were kind, but she did not feel she deserved kindness. She had treated him coldly since the day they met. "I do not understand you," she said quietly. He smiled that small smile again. "That is okay, we have time." She left him in the garden and returned to her chambers. That night, she lay awake for a long time, thinking about his words. Maybe there was more to this human than she had thought. But before she could learn more, everything changed. The alarm bells began to ring across the city. Red lights flashed in the palace. Soldiers ran through the halls, shouting orders. The Dominion had come. The war had found them at last. The explosions lit up the night sky like 1,000 suns, ran through the palace hallways, her heart pounding in her chest. All around her, servants and soldiers were running, screaming. The ground shook with each blast. They had come without warning. Their fleet had appeared from nowhere, emerging from some hidden space route that intelligence had not known about. Within minutes, they had broken through the orbital defenses. Now their ships were bombing the capital city. Pushed through a crowd of frightened servants and reached the command center. It was a large room filled with screens and communication equipment. Her father, the emperor, stood in the middle of it all. He looked old, tired, afraid. "Father," she called out. He turned to her. His silver eyes were filled with worry. "You should not be here. It is not safe." "What is happening? How did they get so close?" Her father shook his head. "They found a weakness in our defenses, a gap we did not know existed. They came through with everything they had." On the screens around them could see the destruction. Warships filled the sky. Their dark, angular shapes blocked out the stars. Smaller ships were landing in the city, dropping soldiers onto the streets. The defense forces were fighting back, but they were overwhelmed. "How many ships?" asked. "Over 300, a military officer answered. His voice was grim. "We have less than 50 still operational." Felt the blood drain from her face. 300 ships. They had sent their main fleet. This was not a raid. This was an invasion. "What about the human fleet?" she asked. "They promised to help us." "They are on their way," her father said. "But they are 2 days away. We must hold until they arrive." 2 days. They had to survive for 2 days against 300 enemy ships. Another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance heard a building collapse. "We need to evacuate the palace," the military officer said. "The underground bunkers are ready. We can hold out there until help arrives." The emperor nodded slowly. "Begin the evacuation. Get the royal family to safety first." Grabbed her father's arm. "I will not hide while our people die." "You will do as you are told," her father said firmly. "You are the last heir. If something happens to you, the bloodline ends. The empire ends." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had a duty, a responsibility. She hated it, but she understood it. "Where is your husband?" her father asked. Froze in all the chaos, she had not thought about Ho. I do not know." "Find him, take him with you to the bunkers. Whatever else he may be, he is still connected to the human alliance. We need him alive." Ran back through the hallways, searching for Ho. The palace was in chaos. Fires burned in some sections. Soldiers ran past her carrying wounded comrades. The sound of battle grew louder with each passing moment. She found him in their chambers. He was not hiding. He was not running. He was standing by the window, watching the destruction outside. His face was calm, but there was something different in his eyes, something she had never seen before. "Ho, we must go, the bunkers." "I know," he said without turning around. "You should go." "We should go," she corrected him. "Together, that is the order." He finally turned to face her. In the red light of the fires outside, he looked different, harder, older. His dark eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "I am not going to the bunkers," he said quietly. "What, you must, if you die the Alliance." "The Alliance means nothing if everyone here dies." He walked past her to a small cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out a black bag. From the bag, he took out a uniform. It was human, military, dark gray with patches and symbols she did not recognize. "What is that?" she asked. "Something I have not worn in a long time." He began to change into the uniform. His movements were quick and practiced. "Your people are dying out there. They will not stop until everyone is dead. The bunkers might protect you for a while, but they cannot hold forever. The human fleet is coming." "In 2 days," he interrupted. "How many people will die in 2 days? How much of your city will be left?" She did not have an answer. He finished putting on the uniform. Then he reached into the bag again and pulled out a weapon. It was a human gun, but unlike any she had seen before. It was large and heavy, with strange attachments on it. "Ho," she stepped toward him. "What are you doing?" He looked at her. For the first time since she had known him, she saw emotion in his eyes, but it was not fear. It was not sadness. It was something else, something fierce, something dangerous. "I am doing what I should have done from the beginning," he said. "I am going to fight." "You fight?" She could not believe what she was hearing. "You are a diplomat. You have never touched a weapon. You cannot." His voice cut through hers like a blade. It was harder than she had ever heard it. "There are things about me that you do not know, things I have tried very hard to forget, things I buried so deep that I thought they were gone forever." He walked toward the door but stopped beside her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat from his body, close enough that she could see the change in him. The quiet, passive man she had married was gone. In his place stood something else, something she did not recognize. "I was not always a diplomat," he said softly. "Before the peace, before the treaties, I was something else, something that kept me awake at night, something that made me hate myself." He paused. "I came here hoping to leave that behind. I came here hoping to live quietly with you, to serve the Alliance, to be forgotten." "What were you?" she whispered. He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was cold, sharp. "I was a soldier, the worst kind of soldier, the kind they send when everything else has failed, the kind they try to erase from the records when the war is over." Another explosion shook the building. Screams echoed from somewhere in the palace. I need to go, Ho said. Get to the bunkers, stay safe. Wait, grabbed his arm. I am coming with you. No, you are the heir, you must survive. I am also a warrior. I trained for battle my whole life. I will not hide while my people die. He looked at her for a long moment. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or respect. Fine, he said, but stay behind me and do exactly what I say. They moved through the palace together. Ho led the way, his weapon raised. His movements had changed completely. He no longer walked like a diplomat. He moved like a predator, silent, careful, always watching. They reached the main entrance of the palace. Outside, the city was burning. Soldiers were everywhere. They were tall creatures, almost as tall as they, with dark green skin and 4 arms. Each arm held a weapon. They moved in groups, killing everyone they found. A group of soldiers was trying to hold the entrance. There were maybe 20 of them. They were brave, but they were losing. They outnumbered them 3-1. Ho crouched behind a pillar watching the battle, crouched beside him. What do we do? She asked. He did not answer. Instead, he raised his weapon and did something to it. A soft humming sound came from the gun. Lights appeared on its side. When I start shooting, run to the soldiers on the left, he said. Tell them to fall back to the fountain. Create a defensive line there. What about you? I will handle the... Before she could argue, he stood up and walked out into the open. He moved calmly, as if he were taking a walk in the garden. They saw him and turned their weapons toward him. What happened next was something would never forget. Ho fired. The sound was not loud, but the effect was devastating. The first soldier exploded, not fell down, exploded. Its body was torn apart as if a bomb had gone off inside it. He fired again. Another died. And again and again. He did not stop moving. He walked forward, firing steadily, each shot finding its target. They tried to shoot back, but he seemed to know where their bullets would go. He dodged and weaved, never stopping, never slowing down. In less than 30 seconds, 15 soldiers were dead. The remaining began to retreat. They were afraid, could see it in the way they moved. They had come expecting easy prey. They had not expected this. Ho did not let them escape. He chased them down, one by one, until none were left standing. Then he turned back to the soldiers. They were staring at him with wide eyes. They had seen everything. Fall back to the fountain, Ho said. His voice was calm, as if he had just finished a light exercise. We need to establish a defensive position. No one moved. They were too shocked. Ran forward. Do as he says, move. The soldiers finally responded. They began to retreat toward the fountain, carrying their wounded with them. Ho walked beside them, watching for more enemies. Caught up to him, her heart was racing. Her mind was filled with questions, but there was no time for questions now. How did you do that? She asked anyway. He did not look at her. His eyes were scanning the buildings around them, looking for threats. Training, experience, luck. That was not luck, that was horrible. He finished her sentence, but not with the word she expected. That was horrible. Never forget that. What I do is not something to admire. It is something to fear. More appeared at the end of the street. Dozens of them. They saw Ho and hesitated. We need to move faster, Ho said. Get everyone to the fountain. I will hold them here. You cannot fight that many alone. He looked at her then. His eyes were cold, empty, like the eyes of a dead man walking. Yes, he said simply, I can. He turned and walked toward the enemy, alone, his weapon raised, ready to kill. Wanted to follow him, wanted to fight beside him, but she knew he was right. Someone had to lead the soldiers. Someone had to organize the defense. And right now, she was the only one who could do it. She ran to the fountain and began shouting orders. The soldiers responded. They set up defensive positions. They treated their wounded. They prepared for the next attack. Behind them, the sound of gunfire filled the night. Screams followed. but they were not screams. They were screams. Looked back toward where Ho had gone. She could see flashes of light. She could hear explosions. She could see bodies falling. And in the middle of it all, she could see him, a single human, fighting like a demon, fighting like a god. She had married him out of obligation. She had thought he was weak, passive, empty. She had been so very wrong. An hour later, Ho returned. He was covered in blood. Most of it was not his own. His uniform was torn, his face was scratched, but he was alive. Behind him, the street was filled with bodies, dozens of them, maybe 100. He walked up to the commander. A veteran named Dong who had lost an eye in the early years of the war. "The eastern approach is clear," Ho said. "They will not attack from that direction again." Dong stared at him. "Who are you?" Ho met his gaze. "Just a human. Do you have a map of the city? We need to organize a proper defense." The commander looked at. She nodded. "Give him whatever he needs," she said. "As of now, this human speaks with my authority." No one argued. No one made jokes. No one dared to say a word against the small, soft creature who had just killed more in 1 hour than some units killed in a year. The siege had just begun, but for the first time felt something she had not felt in months. Hoping. The command tent was set up near the central fountain. It was not much, just a large piece of fabric stretched over some metal poles, but it was enough. Ho stood in the center, looking at a holographic map of the city. Around him stood officers, soldiers, and they all watched him with a mixture of confusion and awe. "They have landed approximately 12,000 soldiers in the city," Ho said. His voice was calm and clear. "They control the northern and western districts. Their command ship is positioned above the government sector. They expect to crush all resistance within 48 hours. Commander Dong stepped forward. "How do you know their plans?" "I captured one of their officers during my walk earlier." Ho pulled out a small device from his pocket. "This contains their tactical data. Their encryption was not very good." Dong looked at the device, then at Ho. "You broke military encryption in an hour." 40 minutes, actually. Their algorithms are outdated." Silence filled the tent. Watched the faces of the officers. They did not know how to react. For months, they had treated this human like a joke, a weak creature that their princess had been forced to marry. Now he stood before them, covered in enemy blood, casually explaining how he had stolen enemy intelligence while killing dozens of soldiers. "What do you propose?" asked. Ho pointed at the map. "They are overconfident. They believe they have already won. They are spreading their forces thin to cover more ground. This is a mistake." He drew lines on the map with his finger. "If we hit them hard in 3 locations at once, we can cut their communication lines. Without communication, their units cannot coordinate. Without coordination, they become easy targets." "We do not have enough soldiers for 3 simultaneous attacks," one of the officers said. "Yes, we do." Ho looked at each of them in turn. "You just need to use them correctly." For the next hour, he explained his plan. It was detailed, precise. Every unit had a specific role. Every movement was timed to the second. The officers listened, at first skeptically, then with growing interest. "Notice something strange." Ho spoke with absolute confidence, but there was no pride in his voice, no excitement. He gave orders like a man reading from a list, cold, mechanical, efficient. When he finished, Commander Dong was quiet for a long moment. "This plan," the commander said slowly, "is either brilliant or insane." "It is both," Ho replied. "War usually is." "And you will lead the main assault yourself." "Yes." "Why, you are not even a soldier. You are." "I am exactly what I need to be." Ho's voice was hard. "I will lead because your soldiers do not know me yet. They need to see me fight. They need to believe that victory is possible. I will show them." Stepped forward. "I will go with him." Everyone turned to look at her. "Princess, you cannot," Dong began. I am a trained warrior, interrupted. I have been in battle before, and if my husband is going to risk his life, I will stand beside him. Ho looked at her. Something passed across his face, surprise perhaps, or something warmer, but it disappeared quickly. Are you sure? He asked. Yes. He nodded once. Then stay close to me, and when I tell you to run, you run, no arguments. They began the operation 2 hours later. Had been in battles before. She had fought against pirates and raiders when she was younger. She had trained with the best warriors in the Empire. She thought she understood combat. She was wrong. Fighting beside Ho was like fighting beside a force of nature. He moved through the enemy lines like water through cracks in stone, always finding the weak points, always striking where it hurt most. But it was not just his physical skills that amazed her. It was his mind. He seemed to know what the enemy would do before they did it. When reinforcements appeared from a side street, he had already positioned soldiers to ambush them. When enemy snipers set up on a rooftop, he had already sent a team to eliminate them. How do you know? She asked him during a brief rest. How do you always know what they will do? He checked his weapon while he answered. Patterns. Every army has patterns. Every commander has habits. They are predictable because they follow their training too strictly. They never improvise. And humans. He smiled grimly. Humans are chaos. We improvise constantly. It is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. The first target was a communication tower. It was guarded by 50 soldiers and had heavy guns mounted on top. A direct attack would be suicide. Ho did not attack directly. Instead, he had soldiers set fire to buildings 2 streets away. The smoke filled the air, reducing visibility. Then he sent small teams to make noise on the opposite side of the tower. Explosions, gunfire, screaming. The guards turned their attention to these distractions. While they were distracted, Ho moved in. He took 4 soldiers with him, volunteers who wanted to see this strange human in action. Was one of them. They climbed through the smoke, using it as cover. They reached the base of the tower without being detected. Ho planted explosives on the main support beams. His hands moved quickly, expertly. You have done this before, whispered. Too many times, he replied. They were almost finished when a soldier spotted them. The creature raised its weapon and opened its mouth to shout. Ho moved faster than his eyes could follow. One moment he was planting explosives. The next moment he was beside his knife buried in its throat. The creature fell without making a sound. Move, Ho ordered. We have 30 seconds. They ran. Behind them the tower exploded. The sound was enormous, like thunder made solid. Felt the heat on her back as they dove for cover. When she looked up, the tower was gone. Just a pile of burning metal and bodies. Ho was already standing, looking toward their next target. 1 down, he said, 2 to go. The second target was harder. It was a supply depot filled with ammunition and fuel. It was also filled with soldiers, at least 100 of them. We cannot destroy it, Dong said over the communication device. There are too many guards. We do not need to destroy it, Ho replied. We just need to make them think it is about to be destroyed. He explained his plan quickly. They would create a fake explosion at the depot entrance, enough smoke and fire to look real, but no actual damage. They would panic and try to save their supplies. While they were focused on that, the real attack would hit their command position from behind. It worked perfectly. They ran toward the depot, expecting a disaster. They found only smoke bombs and terrified confusion. By the time they realized the trick, their commanders were dead, killed by a small team of soldiers led by a quiet human with a bloody knife. The third target was the hardest of all. They had set up their ground headquarters in the ruins of a temple. It was a sacred place, thousands of years old, filled with the ashes of ancient kings. They had chosen it specifically to insult They knew how much it would hurt. "We cannot attack the temple," Dong said. "It is a holy place. The people will never forgive us if we damage it." "We will not damage it," Ho said. "We will take it back, intact." "How?" Ho was silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, his voice heavy. "There is a way, but it requires me to do something I hoped I would never do again." Looked at him. In the dim light of the command tent, he looked tired. Not physically tired, he had shown no signs of fatigue despite hours of fighting. Tired in a different way, tired in his soul. "What way?" she asked. He met her eyes. "When I was a soldier on Earth, I was part of a special program. They trained us to fight in ways that normal soldiers cannot. They taught us to move, to think, to kill in ways that are not natural." He paused. "They made us into weapons, not soldiers, weapons. And you stopped using these abilities." "I tried to forget them. For years I pretended they did not exist. I became a diplomat. I learned to talk instead of fight. I thought I could escape what they made me." "But you cannot." "No," his voice was barely a whisper. "I cannot. And tonight I need to become that weapon again, for you, for your people." Reached out and touched his hand. It was the first time she had touched him willingly, not for ceremony or show. His skin was warm under her fingers. "Do what you must," she said. "I will be here when you return." He looked at her hand on his, then at her face. For a moment the coldness in his eyes softened. "Thank you," he said simply. Then he walked into the darkness alone. Waited with the other soldiers near the temple. They could not see anything in the night. The temple was silent, too silent. Minutes passed, then an hour. Some of the soldiers began to whisper. Maybe the human had failed. Maybe he was dead. Maybe this had all been a mistake. Then the screaming started. Not screaming, screaming. It went on for what felt like forever. Screams of terror, screams of pain, screams cut short by sudden violence. The soldiers looked at each other with wide eyes. What was happening in there? Finally, silence returned. The temple doors opened. Ho walked out. He was covered in blood from head to toe. His uniform was torn to shreds. In one hand he carried the head of the commander. In the other he carried a battle flag, the ancient symbol of the empire that they had been using as a floor cloth. He walked up to the soldiers and planted the flag in the ground. "The temple is ours," he said. His voice was flat, dead. 53 enemy soldiers eliminated, no damage to the sacred structure. Commander Dong stared at him. How did you?" "Do not ask." Ho's voice was hard. "You do not want to know." He walked past the stunned soldiers toward the command tent, followed him. Inside the tent, away from the others, he collapsed. Not from wounds, not from exhaustion. He collapsed because something inside him had broken. Knelt beside him. He was shaking. His hands, which had been so steady during battle, now trembled uncontrollably. "Ho!" He looked at her. His eyes were filled with tears. "I can still feel them dying," he whispered. "Every one of them. I can feel their fear, their confusion. They were just soldiers, following orders, and I killed them like animals." She did not know what to say. She had been trained to kill. She had killed before, but she had never felt what he seemed to be feeling now. "You saved us," she said finally. "You saved the temple, you saved our people." "I know." He closed his eyes. "That is why I did it, but it does not make it easier. It never makes it easier." She sat beside him in silence. Outside, she could hear the soldiers celebrating. They had won their first real victory. Hope was spreading through the survivors like wildfire. But here, in this small tent, a human warrior wept for the enemies he had killed. And somehow, that made him more worthy of respect than any hero she had ever known. "Rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow will be another battle." He nodded weakly. "It always is." She stayed with him through the night, watching over him as he slept. Her husband, the gentle diplomat, the quiet stranger. the most terrifying warrior she had ever seen. As the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, she made a decision. She would not leave his side again. Whatever he was, whatever he had been, he was hers now. And she was beginning to realize that she might be his. News of the night's victory spread through the city like fire in dry grass. By morning, everyone knew the story. The princess's human husband had killed over 100 soldiers in a single night. He had destroyed their communication towers. He had taken back the sacred temple. He had done what no commander had been able to do in months of fighting. And he was just getting started. On the second day of the siege, Ho organized the scattered survivors into a proper fighting force. He divided them into small, fast-moving units. Each unit had a specific job. Some gathered intelligence. Some attacked supply lines. Some rescued civilians trapped in controlled areas. They did not know how to respond. They were used to fighting large armies. They were used to enemies who followed predictable patterns. This human did not follow any pattern they recognized. "He fights like smoke," one captured soldier said during interrogation. "You cannot grab smoke, you cannot shoot smoke, but smoke gets everywhere. Smoke kills you slowly." Stayed close to Ho throughout the day. She watched him work. He never seemed to rest. He moved from unit to unit, checking positions, giving orders, adjusting plans. He knew every soldier by name. He knew their strengths and weaknesses. He put them where they would be most effective. But he also knew their fears. She watched him talk to a young soldier who had frozen during battle. The soldier was ashamed. He kept his eyes on the ground, unable to face anyone. Ho sat beside him. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ho, sir." "Ho, look at me." The young soldier looked up. His eyes were red from crying. "You froze today," Ho said. "You think that makes you weak. You think that makes you a failure." Ho nodded miserably. "You are wrong." Ho's voice was gentle. "Freezing means your mind is trying to protect you. It means you understand that killing is terrible. That is not weakness. That is humanity." "But I am not human, sir." Ho smiled slightly. "Humanity is not a species, it is a quality. It is the ability to feel fear and still choose to fight. It is the ability to feel horror and still do what is right." He put his hand on the young soldier's shoulder. "Tomorrow you will be afraid again, but you will not freeze, because now you know that being afraid is normal, expected, acceptable." The young soldier's eyes widened. "How do you know I will not freeze?" "Because I know you." Ho stood up. "Get some rest, Ho. Tomorrow I need you on the front line." Watched this exchange with growing wonder. This was not the cold weapon she had seen clearing the temple. This was not the efficient killer who had destroyed the communication tower. This was something else entirely. This was a leader. By the afternoon of the second day, they were growing desperate. They had expected to control the entire city by now. Instead, they were losing ground. Their supply lines were constantly attacked. Their soldiers were afraid to patrol alone. Rumors were spreading through their ranks about the human demon who could not be killed. The commander, a new one since Ho had killed the first, sent a message to the survivors. "Surrender the human," the message said. "Give us the one called Ho and we will spare the rest of you. Refuse and we will burn this city to ash." Ho read the message in front of everyone. Then he laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was cold, dark, terrifying. "They want me," he said. "How flattering." Commander Dong stepped forward. "What should we do?" "We should send them a response." "What kind of response?" Ho looked at the soldiers gathered around him. There were hundreds now, survivors from across the city who had heard about his victories and come to join the fight. They were tired, wounded, afraid, but they were also determined. "The kind of response they will never forget," he said. That night Ho led the largest attack yet. 300 soldiers, moving in perfect coordination, struck the main base. They did not try to hold territory. They did not try to win a conventional victory. They simply caused as much destruction as possible, then disappeared into the darkness. The lost 500 soldiers in 3 hours. But the real blow was not the dead. It was the message Ho left behind. He had carved words into the wall of the command building, using the blood of their own officers. I am coming for all of you. The soldiers who saw this message did not sleep that night. They huddled in their positions, jumping at every shadow, shooting at every sound. Some of them deserted. Others begged their commanders to retreat. By the morning of the 3rd day, they were broken. They still had more soldiers, they still had more ships, but they had lost something more important. They had lost their courage. Found Ho on a rooftop, watching the sun rise over the ruined city. He had not slept in 3 days. His eyes were red. His hands were shaking slightly, but he was still standing. She sat beside him. The human fleet will arrive in 8 hours, she said. We just need to hold until then. He nodded slowly. We will hold. How do you know? He pointed toward the positions in the distance. Look at them. They are not attacking. They are waiting, hopping. They think that if they stay quiet, I will not come for them. He smiled grimly. They are wrong. Studied his face. The gentle diplomat was completely gone now. In his place was something ancient and terrible, a creature designed for war, a weapon that could not be turned off. What will you do when this is over? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. I have tried to run from what I am. I have tried to be something different, but every time war comes, I become this again. He looked at his hands. I am tired, so tired of killing, so tired of being the monster that saves people. She moved closer to him. You are not a monster. You do not know what I have done. I know what you are doing now. You are saving my people. You are giving them hope when there was none. You are fighting for us when you could have hidden in the bunkers and waited. He shook his head. I'm not fighting for your people, not really. Then who are you fighting for? He turned to look at her. His dark eyes were filled with something she had never seen before. Pain, loneliness, and something else. Something that made her heart skip. I am fighting for you, he said quietly. When they threatened this city, all I could think about was you. You would die, you would suffer, and I could not let that happen. She felt warmth spreading through her chest. Why? I have treated you poorly. I have ignored you. I have been cold and distant. I know, he smiled sadly, but you were also honest. You never pretended to feel things you did not feel. You never lied to me. That is rare. That is precious. He paused. And you are my wife. I made a vow. I do not break my vows. She took his hand. It was covered in small cuts and burns from 3 days of constant fighting. She held it gently. When this is over, she said, we need to talk, really talk. I want to know who you are, not the weapon, not the soldier, you. He looked at their joined hands. That might take a while. We have time. Do we? He gestured at the burning city around them. War has a way of taking away everything we think we have. Then we make time. She squeezed his hand. Promise me. He met her eyes. For a moment the coldness melted away. She saw the man behind the warrior, the gentle soul hiding beneath the violence. I promise, he said. The final attack came at noon. They knew the human fleet was coming. They knew that if they did not win before reinforcements arrived, they would lose everything. So they threw everything they had at the survivors. 2,000 soldiers, dozens of heavy weapons, attack ships providing support from above. Against them stood 400 soldiers and 1 human. Ho organized the defense with terrifying efficiency. Every position was planned. Every angle was covered. Every soldier knew exactly what to do. They will hit us in waves, he explained to the commanders. The first wave will be probing, testing our defenses. Do not waste ammunition on them. Wait for the second wave. That is when they will commit their real forces. Everything happened exactly as he predicted. The first wave came and fell back after minimal fighting. The commanders thought they had found weak points in the lines. They were wrong. The weak points were traps. The second wave charged forward with confidence. They hit the supposed weak points and found only death. Ho had positioned explosives, hidden soldiers, and overlapping fields of fire. The advance became a slaughter. But they kept coming. The third wave brought heavy weapons, buildings collapsed, positions were overrun. The defensive line began to break. Fought beside the other soldiers, using a rifle she had taken from a dead enemy. Her arms ached. Her ears rang from constant explosions. She had killed more enemies today than in her entire life combined. But it was not enough. "We are losing," Dong shouted over the noise. "There are too many of them." Looked around desperately. The lines were crumbling. Soldiers were falling back in disorder. In minutes they would be overrun. Then she saw Ho. He walked forward into the chaos, not running, walking. His weapon was in his hands, but he was not shooting. He was just walking toward the enemy. They saw him. They knew who he was, the human demon, the one who had killed their commanders, the one who could not be stopped. They focused all their fire on him. Screamed Taeho. But the bullets did not touch him. The explosions did not harm him. He walked through the storm of death as if it were nothing more than rain. She did not understand how. Later, she would learn about the secret human enhancement program, about the treatments that made soldiers faster, stronger, harder to kill, about the terrible price they paid for these abilities. But in that moment, all she saw was a god. Ho reached the lines and began to kill. There was no other word for it. He did not fight. He did not struggle. He simply killed. Every movement was death. Every step left bodies behind him. They tried to run. He did not let them. The battle lasted 20 more minutes. By the end, the army was destroyed. Their commanders were dead. Their soldiers were scattered. Their attack ships were crashing from the sky, shot down by weapons that Ho had captured and turned against them. When the human fleet finally arrived, they found a city in ruins but still standing. They found hundreds of survivors who should have been dead, and they found a single human soldier sitting on a pile of enemy bodies, too exhausted to move. The commander of the human fleet stepped off his shuttle and looked around at the destruction. "What happened here?" he asked. Walked up to him. She was covered in blood and ash. Her royal dress was torn to rags, but she stood tall. "War happened," she said, "and my husband won it." She walked past the stunned commander to where Ho sat. He looked up at her with empty eyes. "Is it over?" he whispered. "Yes," she knelt beside him. "It is over. You saved us all." He nodded slowly. Then his eyes closed and he fell into her arms, finally allowing himself to rest. She held him there in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. The sun was setting over the ruined city, painting everything in shades of red and gold. The soldiers gathered around them. They did not speak. They did not need to. They had seen something today that they would never forget. They had seen a god of war. And he was married to their princess. Ho slept for 3 days. The doctors, both human and could not explain it. His body showed no serious injuries. His vital signs were stable, but he would not wake up. Stayed by his side the entire time. She sat in a chair next to his bed, leaving only when absolutely necessary. Servants brought her food. Handmaidens brought her changes of clothes, but she refused to go far. The room was in the medical wing of the palace, one of the few sections that had not been damaged in the attack. Through the window, could see the city beginning to rebuild. Human engineers worked alongside laborers, clearing rubble and repairing buildings. The alliance that had been sealed by her marriage was now being strengthened by shared suffering and victory. On the morning of the 4th day, Ho opened his eyes. Was asleep in her chair when it happened. She woke to the sound of movement and saw him trying to sit up. "Ho," she rushed to his side. "Lie down, you need to rest." He looked at her with confusion. How long? 3 days. You have been unconscious for 3 days. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. That is longer than usual. Than usual, this has happened before. He nodded weakly. When I push myself too far, my body shuts down to recover. It is a side effect of the treatments. She had so many questions about the treatments, about his past, about everything, but now was not the time. Are you in pain? She asked. No, just tired. He opened his eyes again and looked at her, really looked at her for what felt like the first time. You stayed with me. Of course I did. Why, you do not owe me anything. She took his hand. You fought for 3 days without rest. You saved my people. You saved me. Staying by your bed is the least I can do. He stared at their joined hands. His expression was strange, almost confused, as if he did not understand the gesture. I am not used to this, he said quietly. Used to what? Kindness, care. He paused. When I was a soldier, we were trained to work alone, to need no one, to be complete in ourselves. After missions, I would wake up in hospitals with no visitors, no messages, just reports waiting for my signature. Felt a pain in her chest. That sounds lonely. It was necessary. People who cared about us became weaknesses, targets. It was safer to have no connections. And now? He looked up at her face. Now I do not know. Everything I was taught says I should push you away, protect you by keeping my distance. But, he stopped, struggling with words. But what? I do not want to. The words hung in the air between them. Simple words, honest words, words that meant more than 1,000 speeches. Sat on the edge of his bed. Then do not push me away. Let me in. Let me know who you really are. He was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to talk. He told her about his childhood on Earth, about the small village in the mountains where he grew up, about his parents who were farmers and his sister who loved to sing, about the simple, peaceful life he had before the war. He told her about the day the recruiters came, about how they had identified something special in him, some quality they called potential, about how his parents, who needed money for medicine, had agreed to let them take him. He was 12 years old. He told her about the training, about the injections and surgeries that changed his body, about the endless exercises that rewired his mind, about the other children in the program, 15 of them at first, reduced to 3 by the time it ended. He did not say what happened to the others. He did not need to. He told her about the missions, about being sent to planets where peace had failed, about killing people who needed to die and people who did not, about the nightmares that started when he was 16 and never stopped. He told her about the day the war ended, about how they tried to return to normal life, these weapons wearing human skin, about how most of his fellow survivors could not handle it, about the funerals he attended, one after another, until he was the only one left. He told her about becoming a diplomat, about choosing the opposite of everything he had been trained for, about trying to prevent wars instead of fighting them, about the small hope that maybe, if he saved enough lives through peace, it would balance out all the lives he had taken through violence. And he told her about marrying her, about knowing that she did not want him, about accepting it because he did not believe he deserved to be wanted, about trying to be invisible, to take up no space, to give her as much freedom as possible within the prison of their marriage. When he finished, hours had passed. The sun was setting outside the window, painting the room in shades of orange and purple. Did not speak for a long time. She was processing everything, the scope of his suffering, the depth of his sacrifice, the loneliness that had defined his entire existence. Finally, she said, "Why did you tell me all this?" "Because you asked." He looked at her with tired eyes. "And because I am tired of hiding, tired of being alone, tired of pretending that I do not feel anything." He paused. "And because I I think I am starting to feel something for you, and that terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because I do not know how to feel things without breaking. When I let myself care about the children in my training program, they died and I broke. When I let myself care about my fellow soldiers, they killed themselves and I broke. Everyone I care about is destroyed by this universe. Why should you be any different? Leaned forward and touched his face. His skin was warm, human, fragile. This man who had killed hundreds of enemies with his bare hands was afraid of caring about her. I am different, she said, because I am not going anywhere. We live for centuries. We survive things that would destroy other species, and I am stubborn. She smiled slightly. Very stubborn. He stared at her. You cannot promise that. No, I cannot promise that I will never die, but I can promise that I will fight to stay with you, that I will not leave you voluntarily, that I will try, every day, to be someone worth caring about. His eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink them away, but they fell anyway, running down his cheeks. He looked embarrassed, ashamed. I do not cry, he said. Soldiers do not cry. You are not a soldier anymore, wiped his tears with her fingers. You are my husband, and husbands are allowed to cry. Something broke inside him then, some wall that he had built over decades of pain and loneliness. He began to weep, not the quiet tears of before, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal. He wept for the children who died in training, for the soldiers he killed, for the friends who could not survive peace, for the life he had never been allowed to live. Held him through all of it. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him close, letting him cry against her shoulder. She did not speak. She did not try to comfort him with words. She simply held him and let him release years of pain. When the sobs finally stopped, he was exhausted, empty, but also somehow lighter. I am sorry, he whispered. Do not apologize, you needed that. I have never done that before. Let someone see me like this. Then I am honored to be the first. He looked up at her face. His eyes were red and swollen, but there was something different in them now, something open, something alive. He said slowly, as if testing the word, I do not know if I can be a good husband. I do not know if I can love normally. I am broken in ways that may never heal. I do not need normal, she replied. I need honest. I need someone who will try. Can you do that? He nodded. I can try. Then that is enough for now. In the weeks that followed, things changed between them. They began to spend time together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They ate meals together. They walked in the gardens together. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Learned that Ho loved music, though he could not sing. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that surprised her. She learned that he was gentle with animals and children, as if making up for the violence of his past. Ho learned that was not the cold princess she pretended to be. She was passionate about history and art. She worried constantly about her people. She had insecurities and fears that she hid behind royal dignity. They were both damaged, both lonely, both afraid of being hurt. But together they were less afraid. The court noticed the change. The nobles who had mocked Ho now spoke of him with respect, sometimes fear. The god of war had saved them all. No one dared insult him anymore. But more importantly, they noticed how the princess looked at him, how she smiled when he entered a room, how she touched his arm when they walked together, how she defended him against any criticism, however small. She loves him, the servants whispered. The princess loves her human. And they were right. 6 months after the siege, and Ho stood together on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The streets below were filled with people, and human alike, living together in peace. We did this, said, all of this, because of what happened during the siege. Ho nodded. The alliance is stronger than ever. Your father says it may last for centuries. It will, She turned to look at him, because we will make sure it does. He met her gaze. In the fading light, his dark eyes were warm, alive, human. I have something to tell you, he said. What? He took her hand. It was a familiar gesture now, but it still made her heart beat faster. When I married you, it was out of duty. I was prepared to spend my life as a stranger in your house. I expected nothing. I hoped for nothing. He paused. I was wrong. Wrong about what? About everything. He stepped closer to her. You saw me at my worst. You watched me become a monster. You held me while I cried like a child. And you did not run. You did not hate me. You stayed. Of course I stayed. You are my husband. I am more than that now. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I am a man in love with his wife. Felt tears prick her eyes. Good tears, happy tears. I married you out of obligation, she said. I expected to spend my life tolerating a weak stranger. I was wrong too. Wrong about what? About everything, she smiled. You are not weak. You are the strongest person I have ever known, and I love you. I love the diplomat who was kind to me when I was cruel. I love the warrior who saved my people. I love the man who cries for his enemies and holds me when I am afraid. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other, finally understanding what they had found. A marriage that began in obligation had become something real, something powerful, something that would last longer than either of them could imagine. Thought about the girl she had been on her wedding day, the princess who looked in the mirror with empty eyes, who dreaded her future with a weak human. That girl was gone now. In her place was a woman who had watched her husband become a god of war, and then become something even more remarkable. He had become her home, and she had become his. The sun disappeared below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the sky. Somewhere in the city, music began to play, and human voices rose together in song. And on the balcony, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and looked toward a future neither had expected, but both had earned. A future of peace. A future of love. A future together.